Well, no laughing about this next story. As we've been hearing this morning, today is the 20th anniversary of Melbourne's Hoddle Street massacre. On Sunday, August the 9th, 1987, 19-year-old Julian Knight went on a rampage. In the space of 46 minutes, he gunned down 7 people, injured 19 others in Hoddle Street in the inner Melbourne suburb of Clifton Hill. The 19-year-old was jailed for life in 1988 with a minimum of 27 years to be served. The former Duntroon cadet was reportedly fascinated with guns and with all things military at school, and from prison he's used a number of legal and other ploys to draw attention to his story again and again, including attempts recently to write letters of apology to his victims. So much so that in 2004 he was declared a vexatious litigant by the Victorian justice system. Well, one person who's kept a close eye on Julian Knight is Tess, journalist and these days a specialist in crisis management. She was one of very few journalists who's ever interviewed him face-to-face in a series of personal visits in Pentridge Jail in 1987. And she published a very controversial article in the Good Weekend in 1988 called Confrontation with a Killer. And she's kept a watching brief on Julian Knight ever since. Well, Tess Lawrence joins us now. Tess, good morning.
Good morning, Fran, and thank you very much for inviting me on the show.
Tess, take us back to 1987 when you first met Julian Knight, a then 19-year-old, after this horrible crime. What sort of person did you sit across from?
Well, Fran, I interviewed him, I visited him on a personal level over a number of months in what was known as the old Pentridge prison that no longer exists, and in a fibro cement hut at security, the maximum security H division. It was a shed, really. And really, when sadly, I've been listening to the show this morning and also to AM, and my heart really goes out to the victims and their families and everybody affected by this. And really, the impact still exists. It still hangs like a dark shroud over Melbourne, and very few of us can go through Hoddle Street without feeling some sort of anguish in response to this awful, stench of corpses from that awful night 20 years ago. He, bereft of any, this is a man who I think is a psychopath, and I'm not a forensic psychologist, but I've spoken with enough people that have interviewed him on that level who believe that he is a psychopath, and really disembodied from the great phallus of metallic weaponry that he had with him that night, really that included a semi-automatic rifle, a pump-action shotgun and an M14, and really a gut full of hate.
Let me stop you there, Tess, because you've made this this suggestion you think he's a psychopath. You concede you're not any kind of, criminal psychologist or anything like that. But in the article that you wrote many years ago now, Confrontation with a Killer, you talked about your impressions of Julian Knight when you sat across from him. You said things like, Julian Knight is starring in his own movie. He's handling the media with the same dexterity he handled the M14 on Bloody Sunday. He's suckling greedily on the milks of notoriety and media attention. He wants to know everything about the articles being written about him. He asked me, how much did I know about the night? How much did I really know? Have I seen the pictures? I mean, you paint the picture of a man who wants to live and relive this story, and it's almost his finest moment. But that was back in 1988. Do you think he's still like that now?
I think he is still like that. I haven't seen him in years, but I do know people that have. And he has this dribbling fascination for his own importance. He writes constantly various theses. At one stage I was lecturing at Deakin University in ethics and news reporting, and he tried to get into my journalism course. Of course, I subscribe to the belief that prison does constitute a degree of rehabilitation. Of course I do. But I don't think his attempts at public notoriety since that awful night when he took up a kneeling position at 9:42 p.m. and paid his final respects to society and pumped 6 bullets into his first victim. He has been starring in his own movie since on several occasions, Fran. He's tried to bring court actions to coincide with the time of the anniversary, because in recent years, I think, through knowing what he's like, the media, not in any sort of pact, but has just not noted the anniversary. And this time, all the other illegal actions have been sort of dealt with before August the 9th. which incidentally is also his stepmother's birthday today.
Do you think that's some kind of trigger for him, for that killing spree?
What their stepmother's birthday? Oh no! I mean, he in speaking with me, he says, you know, one of the things, just a build-up of hate and insecurity. Really, he was at the time he was on a charge of he'd taken a knife to a sergeant at Duntroon. And the sergeant or somebody had allegedly touched up his girlfriend's breasts. He couldn't sell his car. Another girlfriend that he was trying to woo at a local pub told him to buzz off. He couldn't sell his car. All these sorts of things. But his impact has been quite insidious, without question. Without question, there was, I don't know whether you recall the Hungerford massacre in a Sleepy Hollow in England, when a chap called Mike Ryan emulated Julian Knight's killings, and in fact at Mike Ryan's home they found pictures of the Hoddle Street massacre on his wall. And likewise with Frank Vichkovic, who was known here as the Australia Post massacre, who killed himself. And really Julian Knight was absolutely disparaging and full of disdain for Frank Vichkovic because he was, you know, quote, a civilian and not trained to kill. Julian Knight always asserts that he went into killing mode that night, you know, as part of army training. But in fact, as one of his fellow colleagues from Duntroon said to me, the army teaches you how to kill, but they don't teach you how to murder.
Tess, your article in 1988 didn't please Julian Knight, and I understand he's threatened you from prison since. Is that right? He's brilliantly strategically, you know, minded, and he sent off a sort of barrage of letters to the editor of the Good Weekend and Mike Smith, I think is a Melbourne editor, and as well of the Age and certainly the Good Weekend, and every time there's a killing of any sort, whether it's Martin Bryant or whatever, he always invariably writes to editors and he's tried to give advice to various government departments. You know, when there's been the recall and amnesties of guns, etc., he sets himself up as an academic sort of theorist and really regards himself as a professional killer and somebody who can speak on behalf of those who would pick up. You know, I mean, I mean, as always in life, you know, the most dangerous of species to humanity is one of our own, and you know, we spawned Julian Knight. Like it or no. Okay. And the frightening prospect is that he has now engineered things on a judicial basis so that legal action coincides with the anniversary, and really we're all doing what he set out to do initially. Tess, we must leave it there. We're about to hit the news. Tess, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Fran, indeed.
Former Age journalist Tess Lawrence.